I come from a generation where yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, and no sir was the norm. I come from a generation where you did not, under no circumstances, disrespect your elders. Because if you did, they had permission from your parents to get you all the way together. And once they got you together, they would send you home so your parents could get you all the way together. I come from a generation where if you were beefing with somebody, you walk home from school, you get into a fight, and you go home. Now, you might have been a little embarrassed the next day if you got towed up, but you made it to another day. I come from a generation where we prayed in school, and the breakfasts and the lunches were made with love. I come from a generation that if you were at your grandparents' house and sometimes your parents' house on the weekends, oh, you was getting up and going to Sunday school. I come from a generation where your cousins were most of the time some of your only friends, and they were more like siblings. I come from a generation of house phones. And if you wanted to look up a phone number, you got the phone book. I also come from a generation, if you wanted to know if a boy liked you or if your friend was really your friend, you get on three-way and you mute the phone so you could hear it from the horse's mouth. I come from a generation where fast food was not the norm, it was a treat. I come from a generation where breakfast, lunch, and supper was prepared every day. I come from a generation where music was made to unite and not divide. I come from a generation that if you had a book report and you needed to do your homework, you went and you picked up an encyclopedia. I am way before Google. I come from a generation where if a boy liked you, he actually showed you that he liked you. He would write letters. He would actually ask you to be his girlfriend. And he would take you out on dates with no expectations, just wanting to be in your presence. I grew up in a generation where you played outside all day. And by chance, you got thirsty. There was a water hose out there for you. Drank as much as you can. I come from a generation where kids stayed out of grown people's conversations. I come from a generation when you woke up on Saturday morning and you smelled that pine sol and heard Anita Baker playing in the background, you get up and start cleaning that room. I come from a generation where in school, if you act up, you had two choices: to get that paddle, that little one swat, or suspension. Most kids chose that one little swat. Why? Because being on suspension was going to be the worst, because your mama was going to work you like a mule. You was going to be washing windows, picking trash up out the yard, washing baseboards. Then she might even call a friend and see if they got some work to do around their house and send you on over there to do that. I come from a generation where you hung out free from the threat of violence. I come from a generation where you sat down and you ate dinner together. I come from a generation where you sat down and watched TV together. I also come from a generation that every 2 years, the entire family would get together for a family reunion. Fish fry, barbecue, hang out with your cousins. Everybody come from out of town. Every 2 years like clockwork. I come from a generation where men actually took pride and having their own house, having a job, knowing how to cook. Like, they took pride in that. Okay? I come from a generation where one bedroom was $325 a month. I come from a generation where you could get light bread, pressed ham, chips, and a cold drink for under $5. I come from a generation where gas was $1.09. I come from a generation where if you smacked your lips, that was a sign of disrespect to your parents or your elders. I come from a generation that where you couldn't even say shoot because it sounded too much like shit. I come from a generation where wigs were for old people. I come from a generation where nearly every neighborhood had a cool pop lady. I come from a generation where you took pride in getting your first fast food job. Now, I didn't have a fast food job. My first job was at the Boys and Girls Club. But you took pride in getting yourself a job at 15 or 16. I come from a generation where you better not ask to spend the night at nobody's house that your mama and daddy don't know. I come from the generation of slumber parties with all your church friends and the people you went to school with. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. What a time to be alive. And now, looking back, and I remember, I just could not wait to be grown. I could not wait to be grown. I could not wait to be out on my own. Whew, child.